It was a quiet Tuesday evening in downtown Chicago when Special Agent Marcus Williams finished his shift at the FBI field office. After 12 years of dedicated service to his country, investigating white-collar crimes and public corruption, Marcus had seen enough injustice to last a lifetime. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen on his way home. Marcus had decided to walk the 6 blocks to his apartment, enjoying the crisp autumn air and the chance to decompress from a particularly challenging case involving municipal fraud. He was dressed casually in jeans, a hoodie, and sneakers, looking like any other citizen heading home after a long day. His FBI credentials were safely tucked in his wallet, and his service weapon was secured in his shoulder holster beneath his jacket. Before we continue with this incredible story, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Your support means everything and helps us continue sharing important stories like this one. As Marcus walked down Michigan Avenue, he noticed a commotion ahead. 2 patrol officers had pulled someone over, and their aggressive body language immediately caught his attention. Years of training had taught him to observe situations carefully, and something about this traffic stop felt wrong. The officers appeared to be escalating rather than de-escalating the situation with the young black driver they had stopped. Marcus slowed his pace, maintaining a safe distance while keeping the scene in view. As an FBI agent, he had a duty to intervene if he witnessed civil rights violations or excessive force. The driver, who appeared to be in his early 20s, had his hands visible on the steering wheel and was clearly trying to comply with the officer's commands. But the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Officer James Patterson, a 15-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department, was becoming increasingly agitated. His partner, Officer Sarah Mitchell, seemed uncomfortable with Patterson's aggressive approach but wasn't intervening. Patterson began shouting at the driver, demanding he exit the vehicle for what appeared to be a routine traffic violation. Marcus watched as the young man, later identified as David Thompson, slowly exited his vehicle with his hands raised. David was a college student at Northwestern University, studying pre-med, with no criminal record whatsoever. He had been stopped for allegedly failing to signal when changing lanes, though the dashcam footage would later show he had signaled properly. What happened next shocked Marcus to his core. Without provocation, Patterson grabbed David roughly and slammed him against the side of his car. The young man wasn't resisting, wasn't being combative, yet Patterson was treating him like a dangerous criminal. Marcus could hear Patterson using racially charged language and making assumptions about David based solely on his appearance and the neighborhood he was driving through. Marcus knew he had to act. As both a federal law enforcement officer and a human being, he couldn't stand by and watch this injustice unfold. He approached the scene, identifying himself calmly but firmly. "Officers, I'm Special Agent Marcus Williams with the FBI. I need to speak with you about this situation." Patterson spun around, his face flushed with anger and adrenaline. Without even processing what Marcus had said, he saw another black man approaching his traffic stop. In his mind, clouded by prejudice and poor training, Marcus wasn't a fellow law enforcement officer but a potential threat. "Back off. This is police business. Keep walking or you'll be next." Marcus remained calm, reaching slowly for his credentials. "Officer, I'm FBI. I'm showing you my identification now." But Patterson, operating under a cloud of bias and assumption, interpreted Marcus's movement as aggressive. In a shocking display of prejudice and poor judgment, Patterson ordered Marcus to put his hands behind his back. "You're under arrest for interfering with a police investigation," Patterson declared, pulling out his handcuffs. His partner Mitchell finally spoke up. "Jim, wait. Let him show us his ID first." But Patterson was beyond reason. He had made his decision based on skin color rather than facts, and his ego wouldn't let him back down. As Patterson approached Marcus with handcuffs, Marcus complied, knowing that resistance would only escalate the situation. But he spoke clearly and calmly. "Officer Patterson, I am Special Agent Marcus Williams, FBI badge number 7749. I am armed as authorized by federal law. You are making a serious mistake." The words fell on deaf ears. Patterson roughly handcuffed Marcus, forcing him to the ground next to David Thompson. Two educated, law-abiding citizens were now face down on the pavement, victims of racial profiling and police misconduct. Other officers began arriving on scene, and Marcus continued to identify himself to each one. It wasn't until Sergeant Rodriguez arrived that someone finally listened. Rodriguez had worked joint task forces with the FBI and recognized the gravity of the situation immediately. When he checked Marcus's identification and confirmed his federal agent status, the color drained from Patterson's face. "You just arrested an FBI agent," Rodriguez said quietly, his voice filled with disbelief and horror at what his subordinate had done. The implications were staggering. Not only had Patterson violated the civil rights of an innocent college student, but he had also assaulted and falsely arrested a federal law enforcement officer. Marcus was immediately released from the handcuffs, but the damage was done. The incident had been witnessed by dozens of bystanders, many of whom had recorded the entire encounter on their cell phones. Within hours, the videos would be viral on social media, sparking outrage and demanding answers. But Marcus wasn't focused on the personal humiliation he had suffered. His concern was for David Thompson, the young college student who had been the original victim of this injustice. David was shaking, traumatized by an encounter that could have escalated to deadly force. Marcus stayed with David, offering support and ensuring his rights were protected. "This isn't about me," Marcus would later tell reporters. "This is about every person who has been judged by the color of their skin rather than the content of their character. David Thompson did nothing wrong. He was a victim of prejudice, and that's what we need to address." The aftermath of the incident was swift and comprehensive. Officer Patterson was immediately suspended pending investigation. The FBI's Civil Rights Division launched a federal inquiry into the department's practices. The incident became a catalyst for meaningful police reform discussions in Chicago and beyond. Marcus used his platform as a federal agent to speak about the reality of racial profiling and police misconduct. "Being an FBI agent didn't protect me from being profiled and arrested," he explained to a packed auditorium at Northwestern University. "If it can happen to me, with all my training and credentials, imagine what ordinary citizens face every day." The case against Patterson revealed a pattern of misconduct and racial bias. Internal affairs investigations uncovered multiple complaints against him that had been inadequately addressed. His arrest of Marcus Williams became the final straw that ended his career in law enforcement. David Thompson, initially hesitant to come forward, found his voice with Marcus's encouragement. "Agent Williams showed me that good people exist in law enforcement," David said. "He could have walked away after they released him, but he stayed to make sure I was okay. He turned a traumatic experience into a lesson about standing up for what's right." The incident led to significant policy changes within the Chicago Police Department. New training protocols were implemented focusing on implicit bias recognition and de-escalation techniques. Body camera requirements were strengthened, and civilian oversight was expanded. Marcus continued his FBI career, but he also became an advocate for police reform and community relations. He established a mentorship program connecting law enforcement officers with community members, breaking down barriers and building understanding. Officer Mitchell, who had witnessed the entire incident, became a whistleblower, providing testimony that helped convict Patterson of civil rights violations. She later said, "Watching Agent Williams handle that situation with such dignity and professionalism while being treated so unjustly opened my eyes to problems I had been ignoring for too long." The ripple effects of that Tuesday evening extended far beyond Chicago. Marcus's story became a powerful example of how systemic issues in policing affect everyone, regardless of their position or credentials. He testified before Congress about the need for federal standards in police training and accountability. David Thompson went on to complete his pre-med studies and is now in medical school, inspired partly by Marcus's example of turning adversity into advocacy. "That night changed my life," David reflects. "Not just because of what happened, but because of how Agent Williams responded. He showed me that you can experience injustice and still believe in justice." The legal proceedings were thorough and transparent. Patterson was convicted of federal civil rights violations and sentenced to 3 years in prison. The city of Chicago settled civil lawsuits with both Marcus and David, using the settlements to fund community policing initiatives and bias training programs. Marcus often speaks about the complexity of the situation. "I don't hate police officers," he emphasizes. "I am a law enforcement officer. But we have to acknowledge that there are systemic problems that require systemic solutions. One bad officer can undermine the trust that hundreds of good officers work to build." The incident became a case study in police academies across the country, demonstrating the consequences of racial profiling and the importance of treating every citizen with dignity and respect. It sparked difficult but necessary conversations about implicit bias in law enforcement. Years later, Marcus and David remain friends, bonded by their shared experience and commitment to justice. They continue to speak together at community events, sharing their story and advocating for meaningful reform. "That night could have ended very differently," Marcus often concludes his presentations. "But it became an opportunity to create positive change. That's what we must do with every injustice we witness. Use it as a catalyst for making our communities better and more equitable for everyone." This story reminds us that the fight for justice and equality continues every day, in every community. It shows us that courage comes in many forms. Sometimes it's an FBI agent intervening in an unjust arrest, sometimes it's a young student finding his voice, and sometimes it's a police officer choosing to do what's right even when it's difficult. Thank you for watching this important story. If it moved you, if it made you think, if it inspired you to action, please share it with others. Hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments how stories like this impact your perspective on justice and accountability in our communities. Your engagement helps ensure that these crucial conversations continue, and that stories like Marcus Williams and David Thompson's reach the people who need to hear them most.